Hey guys, I'm standing here on the coast of Mount Doom. It is called Mount Doom, right? I haven't made a video blog yet this year, so here's the first one of the year. And I've been thinking a lot about this idea about true change and what actually brings true change. There's a lot of life coaches and a lot of spiritual counselors out there that say the reason that you're not going to get the change that you want, usually, the reason that most people don't, is because they try to do too much too soon. They try to bite off more than they can chew. Now, I'm not going to put that forth today in that way. I'm actually going to make a more subtle point today. When I was a kid, when I was younger, and we used to go out to eat to a restaurant, my parents, I would always order something, like a big entree, and usually I wouldn't be able to finish it. My parents would always say, your eyes are bigger than your stomach. They would always say, Pearson, your eyes are bigger than your stomach. That's actually a great way to think about how a lot of times when we want to make a change in our life, or if we want to give something up that we realize is not serving us, we might tend to do something, we might tend to do it in a way that is just too much for us. It's just too much for us to handle. For example, if we want to quit video games, we might try to cut out all screens. Or if someone's eating too much sugar, then they might try to cut out all food with sugar in it. They might even stop drinking juice, because someone with that mindset might say, I'm cutting out all sugar, I can't have anything with sugar in it, I'm not even going to drink juice. But what this does is it actually keeps us from growing. 9 times out of 10, we're not able to sustain that level of change. When you try to make an extreme change on your process of self-development that is just not sustainable, your spiritual eyes then become bigger than your material stomach. I decided to make a couple of big changes for myself at the end of last year and the beginning of this year. Those changes, they involved multiple areas of my life. My diet, my health, my spiritual condition, among other things. And I won't go specifically into what those were because it's kind of personal to me. Feel free to reach out to me and ask me if you want to know details. But suffice it to say, there were 2 areas of my life that I knew I needed to make big changes in. But what ended up happening was these 2 areas, I delved into each of those areas so deeply, and I told myself, okay, I'm going to change every aspect of my life, everything from my diet. My diet has to be perfect. I have to exercise at least 3 times a week, and I have to do this, this, and this. I made a laundry list of all these things that I had to do in order to sustain that change. Needless to say, it didn't last, and the changes were not made. So what I learned from myself is, in order to make a big change, and I'm talking about spiritual change because self-development is always a spiritual process, you only can bite off as much as you can chew, and sometimes that means realizing not your strengths, but your weaknesses. This is an intriguing idea to me because people don't talk about knowing your weaknesses so much. There's much more of an emphasis on knowing your strengths, knowing what you're good at. And while this can be extremely useful and extremely beneficial, it doesn't include the other side of that, which, in my opinion, is even more important, and that is knowing your weaknesses. So how can knowing your weakness actually help you when you're trying to make a big change in your life? For me, both of these areas that I decided to change were extremely difficult areas to change because they were linked to habits that I had over years and years. Now, I was able to recognize some of these changes I could make easily, but other changes, not so much. And they were linked to weaknesses. Now, I will share one example of that, which is caffeine and coffee. I absolutely love coffee. I drink it almost every day, although I have been drinking it a lot less because I have this chai substitute now, which I like. But coffee is one of my weaknesses. It's a vice of mine. And I was giving myself no room at all. I was saying, okay, can't drink coffee, can't eat sugar. Caffeine and sugar are 2 huge things that I had been doing for years. And when I cut them out, I could not sustain it. And I eventually got to a point where I was craving coffee so much that I eventually caved and had coffee. When I caved and had coffee, I then got a bit hard on myself and started kind of beating myself up a little bit and saying, dang it, if only I hadn't had coffee, then maybe I wouldn't have had sugar either, and then maybe I would be feeling a lot better. But of course, that wasn't serving me because, again, these decisions were made from an unreasonable place, a place where my spiritual eyes were bigger than my material stomach. So what I then had to do was I had to take a step back and acknowledge, okay, coffee, it's a weakness of mine. Sugar, it's another weakness of mine. And there are some other vices too that I won't mention here that are also weaknesses of mine. And what I had to do was I had to give those vices and those weaknesses some space. I had to step back and make some room for those weaknesses. I had to acknowledge them, maybe even respect them, in order to allow a change. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you should simply continue enabling a weakness that's holding you back. However, if you make some space for it and you respect it, then you may be able to maybe somewhat lower your bar or make a more reasonable mission for yourself that will allow the type of change that you want. Now, if you're like me and your spiritual eyes are bigger than your material stomach, and you think it's all or nothing, and you think that you have to lead a perfect life and get rid of all your vices, destroy your vices, squash them completely in order to make spiritual progress, this video is for you because now you have a point of reference. You have my experience and you have your experience. You can ask yourself, how is that working for you? How is cutting out everything that doesn't serve you all at once and thinking that you have to be some perfect being and that you can't have a weakness, you have to be like some Superman or Superwoman, how is that working for you? I can tell you, it's never worked for me. So the solution, as I am putting forth here, is to simply give your weakness some space. First, you have to know your weakness, understand it, acknowledge it, give it some space, and work around it. So notice, I'm making a subtle distinction here. I'm not saying don't try to do less. I'm not saying do less because you're doing too much right now. That's certainly a point to be made, but it's not the point of this video. The point I'm making is more subtle. If your weakness is coffee, maybe have some coffee once in a while. Maybe have coffee twice a week instead of every day. If your weakness is sugar, allow yourself to have some ice cream, some cookies once or twice a week. Don't think you have to cut it all out right now. This goes for everything that might not be serving you. If you're still caught up in a cycle of something that's not serving you, it's probably because it has to do with your weakness. And you simply haven't acknowledged your weakness and you haven't given space for it. I'm going to end by saying that this is so important because if you don't give space to your weakness could actually become stronger and make a comeback. Your weakness could come out of the shadows and say, "Why aren't you making space for me? I am mad and I'm going to control you now." This is not what we want to happen because then we'll fall way backwards and end up even more behind than we were before because we're trying to squash our weakness and the weakness doesn't like to be squashed. It comes back with a vengeance. So once again, and I'm going to go ahead and close this video by saying, I've already talked for longer than I thought I would, that the best way to make a lasting change in your life is to make space for your weaknesses, to do a little dance with them. Don't kick them out of your life, don't squash them completely, but just allow them a bit of space while also being aware of your strengths. This I believe is the way to change. It's the way of self-development, and it will allow lasting change in 2021. So that's my somewhat esoteric message for this month, this first month of 2021. If anything that I've said resonates at all, then feel free to click the link below. It'll take you to the opt-in form where you can type in your email, you can subscribe and get more inspiring videos like this, access to me for piano lessons and life coaching, and of course feel free to follow me on social media, leave a comment, and consider subscribing to this channel. Thank you guys so much, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Peace.